Good morning, good morning. Got my coffee here. We're going to be going through the top 10 wide receivers, half point PPR leagues. I'm going to get right into it. Right away, number one, Davante Adams. Davante Adams is by far the easiest number one you could ask for. Nothing's changed since last year. People want to bring up Randall Cobb as like a great addition. You want do you think that he's gonna eat into Davante Adams, totals from last year? Davante Adams had 18 touchdowns in 14 games. Like, his season was insane. Now, do I think that he is going to do the same thing he did last year? Probably not, but he could because the situation's the same. If people think Randall Cobb is going to, take away a ton of targets from Davante Adams, I don't know what you're smoking. You want to see? Let's look at Randall Cobb's stats. Last year on the Texans, 38 receptions, 440 yards, 3 touchdowns. The year before that, on the Cowboys, 55 receptions, 828 yards, 3 touchdowns. Still not really fantasy relevant. The Packers, 2018, 38 receptions, 383 yards, 2 touchdowns. The year before that on the Packers, 2017, 66 receptions, 650 yards, 4 touchdowns. The year before that, 2016, 60 receptions, 610 yards, 4 touchdowns. What is his ceiling? He's probably going to be around 60 catches if he stays healthy the whole year, 600 yards, and 4 touchdowns. That's not a lot. Davante Adams will still have, whatever the hell he wants. And he's still going to get double-digit targets a game, So he's the easiest slam dunk wide receiver one for me. It's not close. Number 2 is Tyreek Hill. Again, tied to a great offense, tied to a great quarterback. He's the number 1 wide receiver on the team. He's a guy that if you were playing in a standard league and you wanted him over Davante Adams, who am I to tell you no? He's got home run ability every time he touches the ball. So his numbers could be, at the end of the year, similar yardage totals as Davante Adams. Could be even more if he, takes a couple more to the house that, standard deviation. He just takes a few more that you wouldn't project that he would be taking. He could have 2,000 yards receiving in a year. He has that ability. He did get dinged up in practice last week with a knee injury, so I would monitor that. From everything I've seen, I don't think it's supposed to be a big deal, but you never like to see that, obviously. So Tyreek Hill's number 2. It really doesn't need much debate here, right? People are going to have them in their top 2. In a half-point PPR league, for me, it's Davante Adams, and it's not close. Number 3 is Stephon Diggs. What he did last year was incredible, and I don't really see any reason why it wouldn't happen again. The one thing I saw about Stephon Diggs, when they lost in the playoffs, he stood in the stadium for an hour after the game and just was distraught and just I never want to feel like this again. This guy's a gamer. He wants to win. He's tied to a great quarterback in Josh Allen. They're gonna chuck. They're gonna throw to him a bunch. I don't really see any reason why he wouldn't produce top 5 wide receiver numbers this year. So I think his ceiling could be wide receiver 1. His floor is wide receiver 6, essentially. So, wide receiver 3 is right there in the sweet spot. DeAndre Hopkins is number 4. He could also be somewhat of a wide receiver 1. You saw at the beginning of last year before Kyler Murray got dinged up, he was throwing it to Hopkins like 15 times a game, and that target share, you just can't, like, you can't ask for anything more than that. You're basically, if you get that type of target share with the quarterback wide receiver combination, you're guaranteed to put up huge points. So DeAndre Hopkins for me could also be the wide receiver one this year, but his downside is worse for sure. He always kind of gets dinged up a little bit here and there. I don't love the the fact that, like, I think he's a little bit of a head case too. But you would think Arizona's going to be in the mix, and they're going to be throwing the ball a bunch. Kyler Murray, that offense is going to be moving. So as long as Kyler Murray stays healthy, I would say DeAndre Hopkins is going to be, a top 5 wide receiver. The downside is, if same thing happens last year, Kyler Murray gets dinged up, can't throw the ball very far anymore, DeAndre Hopkins is going to slip to like wide receiver 10, wide receiver 12. You're not going to really love that, taking him in the first 2 rounds. So just keep that in mind. That's why he's down below Stephon Diggs. I think the upside's there, but the downside is worse than Stephon Diggs's. Number 5, Calvin Ridley. He's just going to be a target hog. He's in a similar situation to Devontae Adams. I don't know how much a rookie tight end is going to take passes away, and they just lost Julio Jones. So Russell Gage will take some of that. Kyle Pitts will take a little bit of it. But for all intents and purposes, like, Calvin Ridley was the man last year, and he's in his competition for targets. Julio Jones left, so he's going to get even more targets. He could be wide receiver 1 this year also. For me, I have a couple things that I'm a little bit concerned about. I know the target's going to be there. Know it for a fact. Him being covered by the ones, the best cornerback on each team, a little bit concerning. That offense is not going to be very good. That's a little bit concerning. Their offensive line, I don't think is like amazing. That could be concerning. And Matt Ryan is like, he's a mediocre quarterback at this point, but he does throw the ball a bunch. And they typically don't have a great running game. So for me, Calvin Ridley kind of sits in that 5 range. He has a little bit more downside, I think, than DeAndre Hopkins, but his upside is wide receiver 1, and he is pretty safe. I would say he is a pretty safe wide receiver to get. But for a second-round pick, might be too rich for my blood. I probably won't go with him in the second round. Number 6, and this is where I would rather just pick this guy instead of Calvin Ridley and get him around later, is Keenan Allen. So Keenan Allen's number 6, and for a lot of people, he's like wide receiver 10, 11. What did we see last year? He was getting a bunch of targets. He is the number 1 wide receiver on that team. Justin Herbert throws a great ball. And that offense is going to be, most likely, people are projecting that offense to be better than last year. Now, Justin Herbert's not going to come out and just surprise people like he did last year. But if he is actually a better quarterback than last year, with a year under his belt, like, Keenan Allen could be sitting there in the top 5 wide receivers at the end of the year, and you got him in the 3rd round. Like, I would do that all day. Keenan Allen is one of those guys. At wide receiver 6, I think I'm a little higher than a lot of the consensus rankings, a lot of the fantasy analysts, but I think that that's kind of a slam dunk. I don't really see the downside with him. Besides getting hurt, he's dealt with injuries in the past, but you could say that for, any wide receiver, his age, I guess. But again, Keenan Allen is a guy that you can you draft him in the third round, you're going to be feeling pretty good. Like, he finally has a really good quarterback tied to him for a whole year. Number 7 is going to be DK Metcalf. Now, DK Metcalf could be the wide receiver 1. At the beginning of last year, people were thinking that he was the wide receiver 1. So if you have him up in the top, 5, I get it. If you picked him over Keenan Allen, also wouldn't blame you either. Like, to me, those guys are neck and neck. The only thing that scares me about DK Metcalf is, like, what the fuck happened last year with Russell Wilson in the second half? I just don't get it. I don't understand what happened. And at that point, DK Metcalf only had a couple more games where he was, like, really, really helping you in fantasy in the last 8 weeks. The first 8 weeks, he was incredible. Incredible. Last 8 weeks, he wasn't the difference maker you thought he was. So I don't know. That team scares me because nothing really came out about, like, what happened. There wasn't, like, turmoil in the in the front office, or like with the coach and Russell Wilson, or there wasn't something distinctive, like the offensive line. They said that they weren't giving him enough time. I mean, that can definitely hurt. But like, Russell Wilson was always a guy that could escape the pocket and throw a good long ball. I just don't get like what exactly happened there. So DK Metcalf, I love him as a talent, as like a physical specimen. Like, the guy's the most dominant wide receiver. If you were to make a wide receiver, people are always like, well, what would happen if LeBron James like played wide receiver or tight end in the NFL? It's like, yeah, if he trained his whole life to be that guy, he'd be incredible, a physical beast. I mean, that's kind of like what DK Metcalf has going on. He's fucking huge. It looks like he's been in the gym 24/7 for the last 20 years. And, it's just like he's just got that makeup to be the best wide receiver in football. But, until I see it for a full year, it's tough to put him above some of these other guys who, I think are probably a little bit safer. Number 7 is going to be Justin Jefferson. Or no, DK Metcalf was number 7. Justin Jefferson's wide receiver 8. So Justin Jefferson, I mean, what can you say about this guy? Last year, rookie year, he comes in and just dominates. Kind of like what Randy Moss did on the Vikings his rookie year. I mean, it was just like, how the fuck do we stop this guy? We have typically our wide receiver 1. I mean, our cornerback, our best cornerbacks, was covering Chris Carter, or was covering last year, Adam Thielen. Like, it's kind of similar now where they're like, well, fuck. I mean, Justin Jefferson's better than Adam Thielen. So we got to make adjustments this year. The only thing that you could say about Justin Jefferson as like a downside is like sophomore slump. You don't know what's going to happen. Is he going to be getting the best cornerbacks? Is that going to change anything? His separation is one of the best in football already. So he's getting the separation he needs, and he's like taking balls to the house. He's fast. He runs great routes. There's really nothing about him that is too scary. So, the only reason why I don't think I'm going to get him this year, I love him, is that he's going in the second round. And, like, I'm just not going to... I'd rather choose a running back. I like to spend my first couple picks on running backs if I can, if the value's there. And then, if I was to get Justin Jefferson in the third round, I'd be completely fine with that. I have him, DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, all kind of in the same range, in the same tier. But it's like, for me, it's like, who can I get in the third round? Wide receiver 9 is going to be A.J. Brown. And people like to just say, without doing whole lot of research, like Julio Jones is number one there. Julio Jones is number one in Tennessee now. You're like, dude, what have you seen the last 2 years? AJ Brown has been like the guy in their passing attack, and Julio Jones is 32 years old. I know Julio Jones is a great player, but do we, if we were to kind of speculate who is going to be playing a full 16 games out of their wide receivers, who would you pick? AJ Brown or Julio Jones? You know, I mean, I would pick AJ Brown, and Julio Jones battles injuries each and every year. He's now 32 years old, going to a different team. When he's on the field, he's very good. I mean, when he's on the field, he is a very good player. But I actually don't think he's better than AJ Brown at this point. I really don't. I think AJ Brown it looks like a linebacker playing wide receiver. He just bodies these cornerbacks and can get open pretty easily, and he's very hard to take down once he gets the ball. So his efficiency is huge, and his yards after catch are huge. So he doesn't need 150 balls in order to be a top 10 wide receiver. He's done it the last couple of years on 110, 120 balls. And that's not going to change. He's not going to get less balls than that this year. Like, why would he? It wouldn't make any sense just because Julio Jones is there. You know, if anything, they're probably going to pass a little bit more and not going to just run Derrick Henry 400 times. So, to me, I think that A.J. Brown's a pretty safe wide receiver one. And that's all you're looking for there when you're in the third, fourth round. You need a wide receiver one. You know? So I would have no problem drafting him in that area. Lastly, my wide receiver 10. And there's a couple guys that I think are close, but and they're kind of in the same tier. But for wide receiver 10 for me, it's going to be Allen Robinson. And this is just like we've seen it so many years where he like ends up being a back-end wide receiver one. So what makes us think that he's not going to be that back-end wide receiver one this year? It's just like so sturdy. If anything, Justin Fields might actually elevate him a little bit. Because what happens with these rookie quarterbacks is that a lot of the time they won't go through the progressions fast enough, so they'll keep their eyes set on one wide receiver, and if he's not open, they'll take it down and run. So that's what I'm kind of expecting with Justin Fields when he takes over, which I'm projecting him to take over in week 3 or 4. So he's probably going to be playing most of the season, Justin Fields. And, Andy Dalton in the first couple games, like, he can at least get it to Allen Robinson to be fantasy relevant for the first couple weeks. Like, he's not completely useless. They do face the Rams week 1. So if Jalen Ramsey's covering him, I would watch out for that. That might be a tough matchup. You know, I would expect him to get maybe like 5 catches for 35 yards or like 40 yards, like really probably not a touchdown. So you have to watch out for that, and that's going to be with Andy Dalton. So that's a very big possibility, and people are going to be down on him after that week. But besides that, he should be good to go. Like, Allen Robinson should be kind of locked in wide receiver 1 this year. So those are my top 10. The other guys that I had that are close are Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin is a beast. And now he has Ryan Fitzpatrick. So he might have a little bit more upside than Allen Robinson. I just think Allen Robinson's probably a little safer. And then one of the other guys, CeeDee Lamb has very high upside. Just watch out with Dak's injury. Just make sure that he's in. And Amari Cooper, I think, falls a little bit because of the injuries he's dealing with right now in training camp, which kind of elevates CeeDee Lamb. I think there's going to be more targets to be had. So I think he's right there in the wide receiver 1 range. And then I think Robert Woods. They're all in that kind of same tier. Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. Both of those guys have... and Mike Evans. Like, all those guys can sit there. They can get, they could reach 1,100, 1,200 yards receiving. And so then it all depends on the touchdowns and the receptions in a half-point PPR league. So all those guys are kind of in the same boat for me. I'm just looking to get one of them. If I don't pick a wide receiver in the 3rd round that's a little higher, then I'm just trying to get one of those guys in the 4th or 5th. That's the way I'm gonna go through it. Those are my top 10. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about these rankings, and we can discuss them. My next one's gonna be probably top 10 tight ends and top 10 quarterbacks. You won't want to miss it. Tune in next time. Peace.